When Master Farad Muhammad was arrested in the 1930s, he was residing in a large luxury hotel called the Traymore Hotel. Here's an actual photo of the arrest record. Master Farad faced being an accomplice to murder when one of his followers committed a horrible murder. To avoid being incarcerated, Farad promised the white power structure that he would cease teaching his brand of religion to black people. A cover story was concocted by himself and the authorities that he returned back to Mecca and would turn over his cult to a black man named Elijah Muhammad. Farad never left the United States. Instead, he chose to keep a low profile, living in various hotels off the wealth he made from his followers. While living in these hotels and not practicing healthy eating habits, Farad also developed a sweet tooth for sweets that he kept consuming around the clock. Fed up with the hustle and bustle of living in hotels, Farad finally decided to purchase a home in Oakland, California, where he changed his name from Farad Muhammad to Muhammad Abdullah. He continued to teach Islam, but without all that spooky stuff that his student Elijah Muhammad was teaching. In Spike Lee's magnificent movie about Malcolm X, there is a scene where Denzel Washington, who portrays Malcolm, has a vision of seeing a man in his jail cell who is Elijah Muhammad, portrayed by Al Freeman Jr. A different account of this event is written in the autobiography of Malcolm X, as told by Aldous Haley. It states that it was someone who looked differently than Elijah Muhammad. Filmmaker Omar Shabazz's research suggests that the man that Malcolm X describes visiting him was none other than Master Farad Muhammad himself. It's very likely that it was Elijah Muhammad who asked Master Farad to visit Malcolm to strengthen Malcolm's belief in the Nation of Islam. Malcolm says that no words were exchanged between himself and this stranger, and that he was not dreaming. Malcolm said that this man sat in a chair, and as quick as he appeared, he was suddenly gone. Omar Shabazz's theory is valid because it's a fact that Master Farad Muhammad never left the United States in 1933. He was living here all along. He changed his name to Muhammad Abdullah and keeping a low profile while still in contact with his student, Elijah Muhammad. At the age of 24 years old, Farad worked as a cook in a small restaurant in Los Angeles. Within a year, he was managing the restaurant for its owner. He fell in love with a waitress, and they both moved into a small apartment together. The love affair didn't last long because of Farad's quick temper, his constant losing of money from gambling, and his drug use. On November 17, 1918, now at 26 years of age, Farad was working at a restaurant at 803 West 3rd Street when a gentleman named P.W. Gillibrand came in, ordered a meal, ate it, and then refused to pay for it. Farad lost his temper and pistol whipped Gillibrand into a bloody mess, knocking Gillibrand to the floor as he cowered and pleaded for mercy. The attack was so savage, Farad had to be restrained by patrons. If you ever come back in here, I swear to God, I'll kill you. When police arrived at the restaurant, Farad was placed under arrest. I swear to God, if you ever come back in here again, I'll kill you. Farad taught his brand of Islam to the American Negroes and was always in their presence. But he was not blind to the violent history among themselves. For protection, he always kept something within arm's reach. Farad never forgot about that incident that went down in that restaurant. While living in various hotels for decades, he spent lots of time rereading old newspaper accounts about himself and Elijah Muhammad when they both made front page news. Always cognizant about his height, Master Farad had short man's anger. His hot temper caused him to keep a firearm nearby, ready to be put into use. Farad's philosophy was arm yourself or harm yourself, and when other folks give up theirs, he'll give up his. Years of consuming all those sweets finally caught up to Muhammad Abdullah. On June 18, 1992, he would pass away from complications of diabetes. While conducting our research, we came across a very strange photograph. In this photograph, several individuals are seated together, many of whom we cannot identify, but we can identify three individuals. In a black jacket is Minister Louis Farrakhan. Seated next to Minister Louis Farrakhan is Master Farad Muhammad, also known as Muhammad Abdullah. He wears a gray jacket. Seated next to Muhammad Abdullah is a man in an all-white suit. This man is Jim Jones, the cult leader responsible for the death of hundreds of people in the jungles of Guyana. The question is, why are these three men seated together? What's their connection? And if Master Farad Muhammad was said to have left the United States in the 1930s, why is he sitting here in the United States between Louis Farrakhan and cult killer Jim Jones? This isn't a red flag, it's a flare gun. It's time for us to start asking some serious questions. When will we stop becoming the nails and become the hammers?
Question number 7. How do you think Malcolm X felt about some of the more paranormal aspects of the Nation of Islam's doctrines, such as the Yaqub's origins and the mother wheel and things of that nature? Malcolm X, in his autobiography, described a mystical experience that he had when he was in prison. When Malcolm was in prison, one night while he was lying awake on his bed, he says and relates in his autobiography that Master W.D. Fard appeared to him, that Master Farad Muhammad physically appeared in Malcolm's prison cell and sat beside him in a chair next to him. Now, this is clearly, and Malcolm is very clear in his autobiography that this was not some dream, but that it was a very real thing that was actually happening. That Master W.D. Fard physically appeared in his cell. I personally believe Malcolm X, and I believe in a way that the validity or the truth of that supernatural event that took place in Malcolm's life is borne out by the exceptional person Malcolm was. Malcolm wasn't like any of the other ministers in the Nation of Islam. There was nobody like Malcolm X. And you only have to go and watch the YouTube videos of Malcolm today, and he remains a completely singular and exceptional figure. And so I'm convinced that part of Malcolm's exceptionality derives from a supernatural encounter he had with Master W.D. Fard. And this is why it's important that whatever aspersions may be cast against Elijah Muhammad or Louis Farrakhan, I think the jury is still out on Master W.D. Fard, and that we need to be careful not to malign Master W.D. Fard, since Malcolm went to his grave never having in any way repudiated the mystical experience he had with W.D. Fard. And that, to me, suggests that Malcolm had a direct connection with this W.D. Fard figure, and that this Master Fard figure, and the mere fact that an organization, the Nation of Islam, is the product of this individual, that exceptional men like Louis Farrakhan, like Malcolm X, like Louis Farrakhan, like Elijah Muhammad, like Muhammad Ali, the extraordinary impact that the Nation of Islam has had in America and the world, I think one has to keep an open mind about the identity of Master W.D. Fard and not be so quick to dismiss him as some kind of a charlatan. Because clearly, if a Malcolm X could come out of could emerge from prison having had this event, this encounter, and could go on to be this truly exceptional being that he was, then we need to keep, as I said, an open mind about Master W.D. Fard and not allow anything we may feel negative towards Elijah Muhammad or Louis Farrakhan to drift over to Master Fard himself. Because I feel that the Fard story has yet to be fully told, and that Master W.D. Fard was clearly an exceptional being. Whatever one thinks of him, he was absolutely extraordinary, and we need to keep an open mind where he's concerned. And so Malcolm, and I think because of that experience Malcolm had, that, in a sense, first-hand evidence Malcolm had of this event, I doubt that Malcolm totally disbelieved in the possibility of UFOs or some of the more esoteric, or as you call it, paranormal elements of the Nation of Islam. I think some of those may turn out to have validity, even if, in the end, Elijah Muhammad and Farrakhan themselves as individuals turn out to have no validity. Right, first question from Omar Shabazz. Why do you think America has such a fixation on religion? Well, from my, I guess, sense of it, America has always believed that she was a country that was founded by God, or established to realize God's purposes and plans in the world. And so America clearly believes she is a special nation. This whole notion of American exceptionalism is at the root of America's conception of herself. And she believes she has a special purpose in this world. She believes that it is part of her role or mission in the world to fulfill a divine purpose. And that may sort of explain America's very close relationship and friendship with the State of Israel, which she clearly feels is a country that has a fate that is wrapped up with the end times, and that America sees it as part of her duty to be in some way associated with Israel in the end times. Hence the very close relationship between the United States and the State of Israel. Question number 2 from Omar Shabazz. Do you distinguish between religion and spiritual? Well, I think there are plenty of people who are religious in terms of a formal relationship to a faith, who don't have a great deal of spirituality about them. And likewise, there are plenty of people who are very spiritual, who may not subscribe to a formal religion. And so I think spirituality and a connectedness to God is probably much more important than an association with an organized religion or a formal religious system. Although I think religion can also lead to spirituality, that you can become, that you can embrace a religion. Like, for instance, many people like Malcolm X embraced Islam, and having been an atheist or a Christian, and he was able to find great spirituality and achieve supreme spirituality, while at the same time adhering to a formal faith. And so yeah, it's I think that the two things aren't always co-equal, but you can have one without the other, and the other without the one. Question number 3. What was the biggest factor in my choosing my religion or forming my opinion about religion? I was born and raised a Catholic, in the Christian tradition. And it was something I just grew up doing because it was something I was born into. But as I grew up and as I became sort of familiar with the the story of Malcolm X, I became more and more interested academically and intellectually in Islam. And it wasn't until much later that I personally formally embraced Islam, Orthodox Islam, as my religion. And so it was really the example of Malcolm X, the personal story of Malcolm X, and his personal example as a man, and his ability to even go back or to set aside long-held beliefs, the beliefs that he had embraced in the Nation of Islam, when he discovered that there was either falsehood in it, or that the so-called Messiah of the Nation of Islam, Elijah Muhammad, was himself a fraud and a phony. And so, so it's the example really of Malcolm X that was very influential in moving me from Christianity to Islam. Question number 4 from Omar Shabazz. In your view, what are the pros and cons associated with religion in general? I think religion, when embraced for the right reasons, embraced on a personal or communal level, can be a very positive thing for the individual as well as for a community or a society. That adhering to religious principles is important and is key in creating some sense of moral structure, moral a compass for people who don't have it. But when religion is embraced at the state level, and you have the establishment of theocracies, or when you have governments that believe that they're fulfilling God's purposes, such as Israel, which then commits great injustices in the name of supposedly being the chosen people of God or a chosen land of God, then that's clearly a con of religion, a con in every sense of that term. So religion can be a pro when it infuses people with spirituality, both as individuals and as communities, to make them do good works. But religion can clearly be a con when it has the effect of creating a Sparta-like state in Israel, or a so-called divinely guided America, who then commit great crimes, supposedly in the name of their religions. Question number 5. Given what you know of the Nation of Islam, what are some of the positive things that the black community has derived from the Nation of Islam, and what are the negatives? There's no question that a positive thing that came out of the Nation of Islam was the person of Malcolm X, and the many decent members of the Nation of Islam who were true to its principles in terms of the repudiation of the whitening of religion, such as the whitening of Christianity, and embracing not a black Islam, even though that's how it originally began, but embracing a form of Islam that had a place for their identities as black people. And no one was a better exponent of that aspect of Islam than Malcolm X. Malcolm X made very, very positive use of the teachings, and the Nation of Islam, as a result of his ministry, had a transformational impact intellectually on the entire black world and the world beyond the black world, and just his personal example is a great legacy to all of mankind. The negative things of the Nation of Islam can be summed up in one name, and that is Elijah Muhammad, the so-called founder and messiah of the Nation of Islam, a man who may have started off well, but a man who, as he became more powerful, took on the corruption of power absolutely, as, say, King David did. Indeed, the Nation of Islam often compares Elijah Muhammad to King David, But what the Nation of Islam conveniently tries to ignore is the fact that King David, at a certain point in his life, succumbed to his own moral weaknesses and took another man's wife, Bathsheba, made her pregnant, and then murdered her husband in order to cover up the crime of adultery. This is documented, I believe, in the book in the second book of Samuel. And so Elijah Muhammad, in some ways, followed in those footsteps. And like King David, he, at a point in his life, became susceptible to the temptations of his secretaries, made them pregnant, and then when that information was found out, attempted to scapegoat Malcolm X the way King David scapegoated Uriah, and had Malcolm ultimately murdered. So the pros of Islam and of the Nation of Islam and the cons of the Nation of Islam can be summed up in the two most important personalities that emerged from the Nation of Islam. Malcolm X as clearly a benefit to the whole of humanity, really, for those who really understand Malcolm, and Elijah Muhammad as again, a person who started out well, a person who had, I guess, good motives at the beginning, but a person who succumbed to the same spiritual disease that set down King David and that resulted in God's chastisement of David by killing David's first son by Bathsheba. And so that, to me, but beyond these two personalities, the Nation of Islam has clearly instilled a sense of pride and dignity and manhood in black men, and a sense of pride, dignity, and true womanhood in black women. And so I think the Nation of Islam actually still has a real positive effect in shaping people's identities, black people's identities, in a positive way, save for those who choose to adopt some of the falsehoods of the Nation of Islam, namely the vilification of Malcolm X as a hypocrite. That is clearly a negative of the Nation of Islam. Question number 6 from Omar Shabazz. In my opinion, does the Nation of Islam qualify as a cult? And if so, why? I think there's no question the Nation of Islam today, under Louis Farrakhan, is a personality cult in his image. And a personality cult built around his charismatic, but ultimately, I guess, evil personality. So clearly, as much as Minister Farrakhan pretends that he does not believe in the followers of the Nation of Islam directing worship at him, Louis Farrakhan has always been about his own aggrandizement, and ultimately he has debased the Nation of Islam into an organization that basically worships and is built around his character. And he's constantly encouraging that. He always refers to himself in the third person, as Farrakhan, and he always attempts to I guess, sort of enhance or reinforce his exceptionality, especially through the whole the claim that he was beamed aboard a spaceship. Those sorts of claims by Louis Farrakhan are clearly designed to place him on a pedestal in the eyes of those who follow him, so that they would, I guess, worship him, or since he says himself that you can't get to the Father but by me, meaning just as Jesus said you can't get to the Father but by me, Jesus. Farrakhan says that you can't get to the Father, Elijah Muhammad, but by him, Farrakhan. And that if Elijah Muhammad is the exalted Christ, it automatically follows that Louis Farrakhan is a little Jesus, as he himself describes himself. And so Farrakhan has turned the Nation of Islam into a personality cult, in fact, to an even greater degree than Elijah Muhammad did. And this, I think, is the only conclusion you can draw about the Nation of Islam today. Question number 7. How do you think Malcolm X felt about some of the more paranormal aspects of the Nation of Islam's doctrines, such as the Yaqub's origins and the mother wheel and things of that nature? Malcolm X, in his autobiography, described a mystical experience that he had when he was in prison. When Malcolm was in prison, one night while he was lying awake on his bed, he says and relates in his autobiography that Master W.D. Fard appeared to him, that Master Farad Muhammad physically appeared in Malcolm's prison cell and sat beside him in a chair next to him. Now, this is clearly, and Malcolm is very clear in his autobiography that this was not some dream, but that it was a very real thing that was actually happening. That Master W.D. Fard physically appeared in his cell. I personally believe Malcolm X, and I believe in a way that the validity or the truth of that supernatural event that took place in Malcolm's life is borne out by the exceptional person Malcolm was. Malcolm wasn't like any of the other ministers in the Nation of Islam. There was nobody like Malcolm X. And you only have to go and watch the YouTube videos of Malcolm today, and he remains a completely singular and exceptional figure. And so I'm convinced that part of Malcolm's exceptionality derives from a supernatural encounter he had with Master W.D. Fard. And this is why it's important that whatever aspersions may be cast against Elijah Muhammad or Louis Farrakhan, I think the jury is still out on Master W.D. Fard, and that we need to be careful not to malign Master W.D. Fard, since Malcolm went to his grave never having in any way repudiated the mystical experience he had with W.D. Fard. And that, to me, suggests that Malcolm had a direct connection with this W.D. Fard figure, and that this Master Fard figure, and the mere fact that an organization, the Nation of Islam, is the product of this individual, that exceptional men like Louis Farrakhan, rather like Malcolm X, like Louis Farrakhan, like Elijah Muhammad, like Muhammad Ali, the extraordinary impact that the Nation of Islam has had in America and the world, I think one has to keep an open mind about the identity of Master W.D. Fard and not be so quick to dismiss him as some kind of a charlatan. Because clearly, if a Malcolm X could come out of could emerge from prison having had this event, this encounter, and could go on to be this truly exceptional being that he was, then we need to keep, as I said, an open mind about Master W.D. Fard and not allow anything we may feel negative towards Elijah Muhammad or Louis Farrakhan to drift over to Master Fard himself. Because I feel that the Fard story has yet to be fully told, and that Master W.D. Fard was clearly an exceptional being. Whatever one thinks of him, he was absolutely extraordinary, and we need to keep an open mind where he's concerned. And so Malcolm, and I think because of that experience Malcolm had, that, in a sense, first-hand evidence Malcolm had of this event, I doubt that Malcolm totally disbelieved in the possibility of UFOs or some of the more esoteric, or as you call it, paranormal elements of the Nation of Islam. I think some of those may turn out to have validity, even if in the end Elijah Muhammad and Farrakhan themselves as individuals turn out to have no validity.
Bernstein Sharif Muhammad was secretary to Master Farad Muhammad. She was born on July 14, 1915 in Robbinsville, Mississippi. Her parents moved to Detroit, Michigan when she was 4 years old. In October of 1932, her parents brought her to the Allah Temple of Islam that was located above a clothing store that was previously a small movie theater. The location was 3408 Hastings Street. Sister Bernstein, at age 17, had very good typing skills, so she applied for the job of secretary at the Allah Temple of Islam. She was given the title, the Reformer. The duties of Sister Bernstein under this title, Reformer, involved organizing temple activity, being treasurer and secretary to both Elijah Muhammad and Master Farad Muhammad. Bernstein Sharif Muhammad, passed away on February 28, 2002. What's very interesting in the small pamphlet she wrote about some of her experiences while secretary to Master Farad Muhammad is the mentioning of the location of the temple being above a motion picture theater. Interestingly, an article by the Detroit Free Press in a caption titled, "Raided Temple Bears Grip of Voodoo in City," the article mentions that inside the temple, when the police raided it, were seats that the believers sat in that were described as motion picture theater seats. Was the temple located in a building that housed both a small theater and a clothing store? Also noted in Bernstein Sharif Muhammad's pamphlet on her experiences as secretary to Master Farad Muhammad is her mentioning of a wine-colored suit that was purchased for Master Farad Muhammad by the believers after Farad came out of jail, and how he suddenly stopped wearing it and passed it on to Elijah Muhammad, whose size was similar. In a follow-up story about the sensational sacrificial murder of James J. Smith, who was a former member of the Moorish Science Temple of America, the Detroit Free Press delved deeper and deeper into the origins of the Allah Temple of Islam and its founder, Master Farad Muhammad. Two homicide detectives named Oscar Berry and Charles Snyder began to uncover enough information about the practices of the religion taught by Farad Muhammad and his right-hand man, Yugan Ali. Robert Harris was mistakenly labeled an important member of the temple, but was only in fact a dues-paying member of low rank and had no standing in its leadership. The title King of Islam is a title that he gave to himself. Harris's behavior while he was in police custody clearly demonstrated the actions of a man insane. While in his jail cell, he would refuse to eat and pointed out the dangers of eating pork. And his enormous strength took many policemen to physically control him. Farad, while in police custody, was questioned left and right about his brand of the practices of Islam, trying his best to evade any questions that might land him in jail. The detectives were stunned when he told them with a smile on his face that he was God on earth in human form. These words, coming from a man quite diminutive in size, truly caused their eyebrows to rise. And to think that American Negroes actually believed that a person who was not only physically challenged in height, but was also of a different race than their own, who they worship as God, truly convinced the white detectives just how messed up black people's heads truly were. In the end, it was all about who would continue to control the minds of black people, white America or a man from Pakistan calling himself God. Farad had to go. It appears that Elijah Muhammad only chose select individuals who he revealed Master Farad's identity with. It's obvious that Muhammad Ali and his wife Khalila were two of that select few. While many people today claim to have specific knowledge about the man they say is God, the reality of it is that very few members in the Nation of Islam actually met Master Farad Muhammad.
Question number 8. Would Master Fard and Elijah approve of today's Nation of Islam? I have absolutely no doubt in my mind that both Master Fard Muhammad and Elijah Muhammad would regard Minister Louis Farrakhan as an abject failure in terms of what he has made of the Nation of Islam. The Nation of Islam today is nowhere near as influential institutionally or globally as it was at the time of Elijah Muhammad's death. And part of the mission that Elijah Muhammad entrusted Louis Farrakhan with was that Farrakhan was to take the Nation of Islam from being simply an organization and make it into an actual nation, into an actual state, effectively. And Louis Farrakhan has traveled the world. He has met with world leaders, world heads of state, to a far greater extent than even Malcolm X, And yet Minister Farrakhan hasn't leveraged any of those relations with those world leaders to get those leaders to back a Nation of Islam bid for United Nations membership. You would have thought that by now, the Nation of Islam, if it believes it has a right to be a state and to be a nation, that Louis Farrakhan, for all his international connections and relations, would have taken the case of the Nation of Islam and its aspirations for statehood to the UN. The Palestinians have taken their cause for statehood to the UN. The state of Israel was born in the United Nations. Every nation and every people who wish to create a state go to the UN to try to stake their claim. They don't acquire farmland. The Nation of Islam program under Louis Farrakhan has been a program that has taught its followers that we need to buy farmland, and that by acquiring farmland, we will become a nation. Now, name a single country in the entire international system that came into being through its people purchasing farmland. That's an idiotic proposition. But that is typical Louis Farrakhan. He is an imbecile of a leader. He is a leader who has... There is absolutely no way that African Americans could ever buy enough land within the United States to become a state. And even if they did buy up an entire state, they are still under the federal government. They couldn't simply declare statehood within the United States. They would have to go to the UN, or they would have to go before the Supreme Court at least, and try to make their claim there. But even they haven't done that. None of the Nation of Islam's legal representatives, like Arif Muhammad or Ava Muhammad, who are both attorneys, have even put together a legal brief for presentation before the Supreme Court, much less a presentation to make before the United Nations General Assembly. And so that just demonstrates how utterly lacking in seriousness Minister Farrakhan is when it comes to fulfilling the mission that Elijah Muhammad left him with. Elijah Muhammad did not simply leave Farrakhan with the task of rebuilding an organization, but with ultimately the task of getting, and these are Farrakhan's, Farrakhan has related that Elijah Muhammad said to him that through you, Louis Farrakhan, I will get all my people. That through Farrakhan, I will achieve, I will realize effectively statehood. That all African Americans, and I presume Elijah Muhammad saw that the entire black world as his people, would be gotten through Farrakhan. Now, Louis Farrakhan, here we are in the year 2011, and how close is Minister Farrakhan to fulfilling the mission that Elijah Muhammad assigned him? Louis Farrakhan has failed in that assignment. And so he has to accept that. His followers have to accept that. There is no other way to spin that. There's no way Farrakhan can spin his way out of a simple recognition that he has in fact failed Elijah Muhammad and failed to accomplish the mission of through you I will get all my people. Question number 9. Why do Nation of Islam members cling to the old doctrine so fiercely? Well, because the reason they do that is because Farrakhan hasn't attempted to, as it were, advance or deepen their understanding of the ultimate purpose of the Nation of Islam's doctrines. The Nation of Islam, and there is a clue as to its mission in its own name, Nation of Islam. Its ultimate mission is to become a nation. And yet Farrakhan has done nothing but simply rehash and repeat the same old doctrines of the nation as it was under Elijah Muhammad, and not even done the minimal work of taking the Nation of Islam to the level of a state. And so it's difficult for Nation of Islam members to break out of the old doctrines if they're not seeing their leadership leading them toward nationhood and statehood and the application, the practical application of the Nation of Islam's principles. And so the Nation of Islam followers have no choice but to cling to the old doctrine because they're not being given the tools with which to realize that doctrine and create something new with their teachings. Question number 10. Is there still a need for the Nation of Islam, and if so, why? Well, I think the Nation of Islam still has relevance. I think there is still a need to teach and to spread the message of Islam and the message of black empowerment that is part and parcel of what the Nation of Islam is supposed to be about, I think that message is still relevant, and in many ways more so. In fact, in the age of Barack Obama, one would have thought that this would have been potentially a golden age for the Nation of Islam, because here you have a president, Barack Hussein Obama, a president with African and Islamic associations. One would have thought that the Nation of Islam would have leveraged the election of Barack Obama to in a way present it as a kind of vindication of its own mission and of its own program. And what has been so extraordinary has been the way in which the Nation of Islam has failed to in a way capitalize on Obama's election to achieve even greater, to spread its doctrine even more aggressively across Black America and the world, and to try to realize the so-called kingdom of God that it sees as its ultimate mission. The election of Barack Obama was not really a setback for the Nation of Islam, it was a golden opportunity. But because Farrakhan is totally lacking in imagination, and the people around him have even smaller imaginations and smaller brains than his, there has been no attempt on the part of the Nation of Islam to, in a way, reinforce its relevance, which it has the potential to do. And so, yeah, the Nation of Islam is still relevant, but it's relevant under new leadership. And Farrakhan's leadership is quite clearly failed leadership, bankrupt leadership, and it needs, in the same way that you're seeing in the Arab world, the Arab Spring that got rid of the dictatorship in Egypt, the dictatorship in Tunisia, going after the dictatorship in Yemen. Gaddafi was gotten rid of, one of Farrakhan's bankrollers and paymasters. The Nation of Islam itself needs an Arab Spring or a Black Spring to remove the old and corrupt leadership personified by Minister Farrakhan and his two sons, and replace it with a leadership that will, as I said, maximize and realize the Nation of Islam's potential and relevance in the 21st century. Question number 12. Can you talk about some of the hypocrisy that shapes your opinion of America and Christianity? Well, I mean, the hypocrisy of the United States is the way in which it preaches a freedom, a democracy, a liberty that it doesn't practice either within its own borders or in the international arena. We have seen the way in which the United States has so-called held itself up as a model of democracy throughout the world while supporting dictatorships, kleptocracies, tyrannies in the Arab and Muslim world, and engendering and fostering hatred towards the United States, which has created security threats against the United States, which led to events like the 9/11 attacks and other expressions of hatred of the United States. So America is a country which preaches a doctrine of freedom and professes a religion of Christianity that it doesn't practice. And that is why the Nation of Islam was able to gain such a foothold in the United States, because it was able to hold up America's hypocrisy to the faces of African Americans, and African Americans clearly saw that they had no choice and no option but to embrace the Nation of Islam. And so the only way America can ever restore any kind of respectability in today's world is to simply practice what it preaches. That is the message the whole world is giving the United States, and it's a message that the United States had better embrace. Question number 13. Do you subscribe to the concept of a chosen people? I think the concept of a chosen people is a dangerous concept. They may well be a chosen people in this world, but I think the minute they themselves adopt the idea of chosenness, it's very easy for that idea to translate into a concept of their own superiority. It's very easy for them to believe themselves to be better than others, and to start looking upon others as inferiors. And we see that chosen people concept at its most destructive in the State of Israel. I mean, the State of Israel is a country that is premised on the idea of a chosen people, and look at the way they behave as a result of that idea. They see themselves as special, they see themselves as entitled to take the land of the Palestinians and to develop a nuclear arsenal and to threaten preemptive military action against countries like Iran or countries that it perceives a threat to come from. And so chosenness is a very dangerous concept. The Nazis borrowed that idea ultimately from Judaism. They saw the Aryan master race as being chosen. And so these notions of chosenness, I think, are dangerous. And irrespective of whether or not any people are chosen, I think anytime they themselves believe themselves to be chosen, I think they're in a slippery slope to destruction. Question number 14. How do I feel about the megachurch phenomenon? I think the megachurch phenomenon is a natural outcome of the commercialization of Christianity in America. I mean, when you have a country that places such a high value on acquisition of wealth and on aggrandizement of the self, it's almost inevitable that religion itself will attempt to, and religious ministers will attempt to profit, to achieve maximum profit from their congregation through all means of marketing, through all means of so-called charity, and ultimately you will have a situation where churches become almost like corporations and just expand and expand and expand to ever more absurd and grotesque dimensions. And so the megachurch phenomenon is a natural and logical consequence of the Americanization of Christianity. And we see that megachurch phenomenon not just in America, but spreading in other places that have come under America's influence. Question number 15. What is your opinion about the devil? Does one exist? I think there's no question that there is evil in this world. Pure evil. The Nazis are an example of evil. The policies of the United States government or the Israeli government can also be looked upon as examples of evil. And whether all that evil derives from an actual devil, an actual personalized satanic influence, is hard to say. I don't know how there can be evil without a devil, any more than they can be good without a God. Just as I believe that there is an ultimate source of all the world's goodness and an ultimate repository, if you will, of all the world's goodness in the person of God and his messengers, I do believe that the world's evil also has a repository and has an ultimate ambassador. And the Bible and the Quran and other religious texts refer to this person in one form or another as Satan. And so, yeah, I think I have to believe that there is a devil in a world as filled with evil as this, and that this influence ultimately will be the ruination of civilization and will ultimately call forth God's wrath on our planet. Question number 16, I think it is. Why do you think the oppression or the persecution of darker-skinned people has perpetuated for so long in our world? I think, I guess, the doctrines of racial superiority that were at the root of the original mistreatment, exploitation, oppression of people of color, those doctrines created a world, and that world continues to perpetuate these systems of persecution and oppression, but not just against darker people anymore. We're seeing with the Occupy Wall Street movements and the Arab Spring and other forms of uprisings throughout the world, that people ultimately, of all races, are now feeling oppressed and persecuted by a system that was originally established to maybe to persecute people of color and to exploit people of color. But we now see how that system has encompassed and consumed our planet and is persecuting people beyond just people of any one race. But yeah, I think it's been difficult to get rid of some of the doctrines and just the advantages that accrue to white skin privilege. People who are in a position of privilege don't readily give up that privilege, and so and hence, the persistence of the persecution of people of color. Another question: why do some Americans think that God is always on America's side? I think America has seen itself emerge from nowhere, from land that belonged to Native Americans, that was settled by Europeans, and that has gone on to become a great power with success after success, victory after victory, that it's very difficult for Americans not to believe that God is somehow backing the United States, because America seems to get its way all the time and has been getting its way for a very long time. And so anyone who is the product of such a civilization can't but think that their civilization is blessed by God, has the backing of God, has the sanction of God, and they will continue to believe in this kind of view until it attains a level of hubris, which has happened now, where George Bush believed that it was God told him to go into Iraq and God told him to go into Afghanistan and all manner of nonsense like that. And yet clearly those adventures by the United States have been the undoing of the United States. And so, Americans will always believe that God is on their side as long as they continue to have victory and success. But now that America is suffering more and more setbacks, it's inevitable, and more Americans are beginning to wonder whether God has abandoned them or whether God has determined that it's time now to chastise the United States and bring her to her knees. Question number 18. Do you believe that had Malcolm X lived, he would eventually have outgrown Orthodox Islam the way he outgrew the Nation of Islam? I think that's difficult to know. I think Malcolm X was so exceptional, so extraordinary, so unique that, had he lived, I'm convinced that he would have effectively Islamized the United States of America, and America today would have been a better country in terms of its relations with the Muslim world. Indeed, it would have been at the center of the Muslim world, just as Rome, which once opposed Christianity, became the capital of Christianity. I don't think there was any other Muslim American who could have changed Washington into the capital of Islam like Malcolm X. So, far from outgrowing Islam, Orthodox Islam, I think Malcolm X would have realized Orthodox Islam in America. He would have helped Orthodox Islam realize its full potential within the United States, and I think most of the American population today would have embraced Islam by now, had Malcolm X not been murdered by Elijah Muhammad, Louis Farrakhan, and the Nation of Islam.
Many memorable events appeared in various newspapers that informed readers worldwide to keep them abreast of the latest happenings. The arrest of Wally Farad in connection to his influence over one of his followers named Robert Kareem, who committed a ghastly ritualistic murder, shook up anyone who read the details of the sickening crime. The Detroit Free Press photographers captured a photograph of Master Farad Muhammad seated with two homicide detectives, Oscar Berry and Charles Snyder, in November of 1932. But it certainly wasn't the first time that Wally Farad received unwanted notoriety in a newspaper. Back in February 17, 1926, an article from a Spanish-language newspaper called Heraldo de Mexico was an article published in Los Angeles, California on February 17, 1926 on page 8 that read, headline, $5,000 in opiates are confiscated. Wally Ford, proprietor of the restaurant at 3rd and Flower, and known sidewalk politician, was who possessed drugs. After 30 days of patient waiting, during which day and night closely watching the place, where it was known that there was a locked batch of opiates, various federal prohibition agents succeeded in finally bringing about the capture of a known sidewalk politician and proprietor of the restaurant located on Flower and 3rd. The aforementioned subject, who calls him Wally Ford, had in his possession several ounces of cocaine and other opiates which were valued at $5,000. The skilled detectives, whose victories this was, were Mr. Southard, Cox, and Burstart, laid out an ingenious plan for the aforementioned Ford to fall into a trap. To do it, the detectives, passing as morphine addicts, presented themselves to the restaurant proprietor and made known that they wanted to buy una cupita, the street term for morphine. Ford naively falls for the trap. Not even suspecting who the three individuals buying the morphine were, Ford agreed to sell a little quantity of drugs for $235. As planned, Detective Cox presented himself dressed in such a way to truly appear as a morphine addict. He paid the stipulated sum, traded, receiving from Ford the morphine, which served as the body of evidence. Naturally, Ford was arrested and led to jail, where he will hope to be taken to a jury. It is interesting to note that this newspaper article supports author Carl Evans' claim that Farad was probably the same man known as George Farr in San Francisco in 1921. It was said that Ford was a known sidewalk politician. Farad's wife, Hazel, explicitly denied that Ford had ever talked about radical political ideas. She was with Farad as late as 1920, yet by 1921, George Farr was a popular militant UNIA member openly proclaiming radical pro-Japanese ideas. One is inclined to think that Ford/Farad was indeed George Farr, one of the many aliases of Master Farad Muhammad. It is painful to think that Master Farad was watching from afar the escalating family feud between his once assistant, Elijah Muhammad, and Elijah's once faithful servant, Malcolm X. A family feud that led to one man's murder. If Master Farad truly had any power, perhaps he should have stepped in and prevented Malcolm's assassination by calling time out between the fighting men. To think that throughout all history's chaos that black people had to endure since Farad's supposed disappearance, Farad was right here in the United States all along. It's enough to send chills down one's spine. Some may argue that Farad did the best he could in raising the consciousness of black people to the evils of white America. He was indeed incarcerated for his revolutionary manifesto in the past. If he came forward to step in between his two feuding students, would there be a price to pay? By remaining silent and not acting as peacemaker, he could avoid the charge of being an accessory to murder, and again, put behind bars. Playing God can literally put you between a rock and a hard place. As Nation of Islam researcher Carl Evans pointed out in his book, The Messenger, The Rise and Fall of Elijah Muhammad, observed the back-to-back successive prison ID numbers of Farad and Donaldson when they both entered San Quentin for selling drugs.
Question number 19. Given the current state of black people, what provides me with the most sense of pride and what do I deem to be the most shameful? I think the survivability of black people is something that is truly extraordinary and something to be proud of. Our survivability and adaptability as a people is amazing. We have an incredible ability to recover from whatever blows are inflicted upon us. And the mere fact that, that an African American could take the White House and become president is yet another tribute to the miraculousness of blackness. I believe that black people are an inherently miraculous people, or a people with miraculous capacities. And we are the people through whom the world's miracles are worked. I mean, the election of Barack Obama had a huge impact on the world because it seemed like a miraculous event. It seemed like something that had been so improbable, so unlikely, and yet it happened. Against all odds, a black man became the president of the United States. That, in the context of today's world, is a miracle. And so people around the world continue to look upon us as the people through whom, in a sense, God's miracles are worked in this world. The milestones that black people achieve, the thresholds that black people cross, are the yardstick and the barometer of human potentiality in our world. There is no other race of people that perform the same function as we do. The things that we are able to achieve against all the odds are the things that are able to have the effect of instilling in humanity an incredible sense of its own potential. And so being black is a real privilege, and it's something that I celebrate, and it's something that there is simply no ceiling to the sense of elation to be derived from that particular utility of blackness. Because we're the people who are so far at the bottom, because we're the people who are so downtrodden, whenever a black man breaks through and becomes the president of the United States, or breaks through like Serena and Venus Williams and wins Wimbledon, or breaks through like Michael Jackson and becomes the global and unparalleled superstar that he was, black people perform that role. We are the miracle workers of the human race, or we are the people through whom the world is able to realize its own, or to witness its own potential for the miraculous. And so that really, I think, is the thing that gives me the greatest hope. The thing that really gives me the greatest despair is the inability of black people to recognize that about themselves. The fact that they don't recognize their own miraculousness, and they don't recognize their own role in this world as the world's miracle workers. I think if more black people knew that about themselves and recognized that in themselves, they would do better by themselves than they're presently doing. They wouldn't be killing one another like they do. They wouldn't be displaying hatred towards one another like they do. I think they would be able to, they would be a more productive and a more goodness-realizing people than they presently are. Now, question number 19, or I think it's 20. Why has there been such a void or a lack of principled leadership since the 1960s? I think the 60s was a unique time of renaissance. It was a time when you obviously had a very real system of institutionalized injustice in the United States, segregation, Jim Crow. And so there was a very clear and definable set of injustices that called forth principled leaders like Malcolm X. The circumstances of the time brought out principle in leadership. Whereas we live in times today of such ambiguity. We live in times where the oppressor is more invisible, where the systems of oppression are more diffuse and hard to pin down, that it's very difficult for a person to emerge with defined principles against something that itself is hard to define or grasp. But I think those leaders are there. I think a time is coming when that clarity will be restored, when the evil forces of this world will be much more clearly defined. And that clear definition, that clarity of seeing the forces of evil in the world face to face, with us, is going to call forth a principled leader to challenge that force of evil. And so I think principles, certainly, in leadership are going to emerge once the condition of the people is properly clarified and they understand with total clarity what they're in and what they're up against. Question number 21. Does religion have a role in repairing black communities, and what is that role? Like I sort of said before, religion is a powerful agent for establishing communities, strengthening communities and restoring communities that have fallen apart. The immorality in the black community, the wild and almost animalistic behavior that we see in a lot of our popular music, our rap music, the type of television and programming that our children are exposed to, that type of a condition creates a setting for religion to assert itself and to play a positive role, a healthy role, in trying to restore people to principles. And the thing that made Malcolm so exceptional is that he made religion cool. He was a Muslim who made that kind of austere lifestyle something cool. It was cool not to drink. It was cool not to smoke. It was cool not to do drugs. It was cool not to sleep around with women or men. It was cool to do the right thing. Malcolm had a way of making that kind of moral rectitude attractive to the street type of person, the hip type of person, who normally looks down on things like that. That was what was so magical about Malcolm X. He was a person who was able to take principles of moral and spiritual propriety that are often associated with something that is outmoded or old-fashioned, and make them futuristic and make them something that was attractive. And so, yeah, there is a role for religion to play, and I think the resurrection of Malcolm X and reawakening an understanding of who Malcolm was is key to restoring a positive and powerful and healthy role for religion to play in the community.
When Master Farad Muhammad was arrested in the 1930s, he was residing in a large luxury hotel called the Traymore Hotel. Here's an actual photo of the arrest record. Master Farad faced being an accomplice to murder when one of his followers committed a horrible murder. To avoid being incarcerated, Farad promised the white power structure that he would cease teaching his brand of religion to black people. A cover story was concocted by himself and the authorities that he returned back to Mecca and would turn over his cult to a black man named Elijah Muhammad. Farad never left the United States. Instead, he chose to keep a low profile, living in various hotels off the wealth he made from his followers. While living in these hotels and not practicing healthy eating habits, Farad also developed a sweet tooth for sweets that he kept consuming around the clock. Fed up with the hustle and bustle of living in hotels, Farad finally decided to purchase a home in Oakland, California, where he changed his name from Farad Muhammad to Muhammad Abdullah. He continued to teach Islam, but without all that spooky stuff that his student Elijah Muhammad was teaching. It's a fact that Master Farad Muhammad never left the United States in 1933. He was living here all along. He changed his name to Muhammad Abdullah and keeping a low profile while still in contact with his student Elijah Muhammad.
At the age of 24 years old, Farad worked as a cook in a small restaurant in Los Angeles. Within a year, he was managing the restaurant for its owner. He fell in love with a waitress, and they both moved into a small apartment together. The love affair didn't last long because of Farad's quick temper, his constant losing of money from gambling, and his drug use. On November 17, 1918, now at 26 years of age, Farad was working at a restaurant at 803 West 3rd Street when a gentleman named P.W. Gillibrand came in, ordered a meal, ate it, and then refused to pay for it.
Farad lost his temper and pistol whipped Gillibrand into a bloody mess, knocking Gillibrand to the floor as he cowered and pleaded for mercy. The attack was so savage, Farad had to be restrained by patrons. If you ever come back in here, I swear to God, I'll kill you. When police arrived at the restaurant, Farad was placed under arrest.
I swear to God, if you ever come back in here again, I'll kill you.
Farad taught his brand of Islam to the American Negroes and was always in their presence. But he was not blind to the violent history among themselves. For protection, he always kept something within arm's reach. Farad never forgot about that incident that went down in that restaurant. While living in various hotels for decades, he spent lots of time rereading old newspaper accounts about himself and Elijah Muhammad when they both made front page news. Always cognizant about his height, Master Farad had short man's anger. His hot temper caused him to keep a firearm nearby, ready to be put into use. Farad's philosophy was arm yourself or harm yourself. And when other folks give up theirs, he'll give up his. Years of consuming all those sweets finally caught up to Muhammad Abdullah. On June 18, 1992, he would pass away from complications of diabetes.
Question number 22. Would Malcolm X approve of Minister Farrakhan today? I don't think Malcolm X would approve of Minister Louis Farrakhan in the light of Minister Farrakhan's failure to realize justice and to realize nationhood for his people. When Malcolm X, in the year leading up to Malcolm's assassination, Malcolm X had traveled to Africa, the Middle East, and elsewhere to try to get African leaders, Asian leaders and others, to back an African-American bid to bring their case, the case of African Americans, the human rights and justices African Americans suffered, before the United Nations. That was Malcolm's purpose. That was what Malcolm was doing in the year, the last year of his life. So he was about the business of bringing the case of African Americans to the UN. Now, Louis Farrakhan, as I said before, has met with more world leaders than Malcolm did. Following the Million Man March, Louis Farrakhan traveled throughout Africa and the Middle East and met with practically every head of state in Africa, numerous heads of state in the Middle East, and some in Asia. Minister Farrakhan is seen on YouTube having photo ops with these leaders. But Louis Farrakhan has done absolutely nothing to get those leaders to back African Americans in bringing the case of African Americans before the United Nations. And so as a result of that, there's no way that Malcolm X would look upon Farrakhan as a man who has done with what he has been given what he should have done. Louis Farrakhan has been empowered by black people. You saw the Million Man March, you saw the Million Family March, you saw the Millions More movement. Black Americans, time and time again, have turned out in unprecedented numbers to show Minister Farrakhan their support. But Minister Farrakhan has failed to leverage, or simply refused to leverage that support to try to achieve concrete gains for African Americans. So there's no question Malcolm X would look at Louis Farrakhan as a person who had been a complete failure as a leader. And what is particularly galling is that Minister Farrakhan regards himself as a man who is greater than Malcolm X, who has achieved more than Malcolm X, just because he has been able to stage larger events and spectacles than Malcolm, even if nothing has resulted from those spectacles. And so no, there's no question that Malcolm X would regard Minister Farrakhan not just as a failure, but in many ways as a traitor to his people. Question number 23. Do I think America's views on religion holds America back as a supposedly progressive and civilized country? And how should that be changed? I think America fails to properly apply religious principles to her foreign or domestic policies. She's a country that purports to be a country of religion and of God, but that type of religious principle is completely absent in the way in which America conducts herself domestically and internationally. So there's no question that religion, in the way it's applied by the United States, is applied in a very retrograde or regressive or backward fashion, and in a way that ultimately is detrimental to the United States. Question number 7. How do you think Malcolm X felt about some of the more paranormal aspects of the Nation of Islam's doctrines, such as the Yaqub's origins and the mother wheel and things of that nature? Malcolm X, in his autobiography, described a mystical experience that he had when he was in prison. When Malcolm was in prison, one night while he was lying awake on his bed, he says and relates in his autobiography that Master W.D. Fard appeared to him, that Master Farad Muhammad physically appeared in Malcolm's prison cell and sat beside him in a chair next to him. Now, this is clearly, and Malcolm is very clear in his autobiography that this was not some dream, but that it was a very real thing that was actually happening. That Master W.D. Fard physically appeared in his cell. I personally believe Malcolm X, and I believe in a way that the validity or the truth of that supernatural event that took place in Malcolm's life is borne out by the exceptional person Malcolm was. Malcolm wasn't like any of the other ministers in the Nation of Islam. There was nobody like Malcolm X, and you only have to go and watch the YouTube videos of Malcolm today, and he remains a completely singular and exceptional figure. And so I'm convinced that part of Malcolm's exceptionality derives from a supernatural encounter he had with Master W.D. Fard. And this is why it's important that whatever aspersions may be cast against Elijah Muhammad or Louis Farrakhan, I think the jury is still out on Master W.D. Fard, and that we need to be careful not to malign Master W.D. Fard, since Malcolm went to his grave never having in any way repudiated the mystical experience he had with W.D. Fard. And that, finally, do I think it's time to remove religion and religious talk from the landscape? I think the politicization of religion is absolutely a bad thing. It's a destructive thing, it's a dangerous thing, and it doesn't help to achieve anything progressive in America or in the world. And so the removal of that kind of religious talk, I think, would be a first step. But more important than removing religious talk is removing the practices, the political practices in the name of religion that have corrupted religion. And so that's really what needs to be focused on is more the removal of the practices, politicized practices wrapped up in religion that do harm to the United States, as opposed to simply a cosmetic removal of religious terminology from the landscape. Well, Brother Omar Shabazz, I hope that's going to be satisfactory for your film. If there's anything extra you need us to send you, I'll gladly send it to you. And sorry I took so long. All right. Bye-bye.
If you want a much more detailed account of information on Master Farad Muhammad, Elijah Muhammad, Malcolm X, and the Nation of Islam, under no circumstances are you to miss Omar Shabazz's Oh My God, Master Farad, presented right here on YouTube.